And we're live. Hi everyone, this is Average Gamer, and we're returned to AG's Old World tutorial series, and we'll be continuing on to tutorial 12, Technology Basics. The goal of this is not to make you experts of the tech tree. The goal of this is to explain the basic of how technology works and give some tips for the very early game regarding what you might want to focus on. So whenever you need to pick a technology, it shows something like this. Choose, research, and then you have your 3 texts. And you also see the star that says recommended. For beginners, recommended is not bad, but once you become more proficient, odds are you might want to prioritize certain things over others. Now, how technology works is that it works on kind of a card tech deck format. So you'll see here that you have 3 technology available and 4 cards in the discard pile. If we look at the tech tree, so first you'll see the technology that you have that has a check mark under them, and then you'll have technology that has an exclamation mark under them. Those are the ones that are available to you right now. And then you have the ones that has kind of a card with, I guess, dashing cards. You'll see that it's in the discard pile. So in theory, for my current situation, labor force, spoked wheel, military drill, stonecutter, divination, administration, and food boost should all be available to me. But you can't just pick whatever. You have to pick one of the cards that the deck deals to you. So for us, we're dealt this hand. And the way it works is that you pick one of these cards. The 2 cards you didn't pick go to this discard pile. And by going to the discard pile, what happens is then the deck basically reshuffles and you get another 3 option. So the idea is that over time you will have access to all the technology, but you have to select what you want at the time. So you have to prioritize what you want. So maybe this turn I have stone cutting, divination, and administration. And the next turn I get labor force, food boost, military drill. Actually spoked wheel. Now the reason why you will actually get 4, actually I believe you could get 4, is because you have a card. If you look at food boost, it says permanently trashed when discarded. So right now you haven't actually discarded, it just started in the discard pile. But if your food boost shows up here and you decide to pick some other tech because you need it more, then you won't get food boost. So there are certain cards where you will have to pick. Do you want it now because it's a temporary boost? And there are a couple of them. Like for example, Paulus has this free seller card. So maybe you want to expand. So you want to go to Paulus and hope you draw free seller so that you get free seller. And there are a bunch for all of them. You have stone boost, you have food boost, you have iron boost. You get the idea. So cards that when you hover over and says permanently trashed, it means that you either pick that now or you won't get it ever again. And usually they're solid enough that chances are you do want them because they give you a big boost to your resources or a free seller, and those matter. Like for example, the stone boost gives you plus 200 stone. If you look at the wonders that you will encounter early on, that's a third for some of the wonders and half of what you need. Like if I get that stone boost, I will have enough to build the oracle. So it's definitely not something you want to overlook. And what happens is the deck will constantly shuffle and will keep rotating through all the cards. So if you have, say, 9 cards, right, and you're getting 3 techs each time, it means that you have to wait 3 turns before you get your choice. Like for example, if right now I decide to go for stone cutting, and let's say I have 2 more cards in my discard pile, what will happen is I will have to go through all 6 of those, which means 2 more turns, before I have a chance of getting divination or administration again. So what you pick is extremely important. Now you might be thinking, what do you want to prioritize, right? Because from the very get-go, you are forced to think about what you want to prioritize. And there are a couple of things you want to focus on. But for me personally, I work with these priorities, at least early on. These priorities will change depending on your map, your neighbors, and all of that. But your first priority is expanding. You want to expand to empty city sites, ones that have no barbarians, no minor tribes, that are just empty, and you want to garrison a unit there so that once your settler ready, you can send them and you'll be able to grab that site. That's one of the priorities. But of course, you have to remember that you also need to have a military to defend yourself against early wars. Because if you get a lot of cities, but you don't have the right units to defend them, you will find yourself struggling a lot. Therefore, expansion first. And expansion, if you remember, for settlers, you need both food and growth. Now, growth in your capital early on is probably not that urgent because you don't want to use up more food and have higher maintenance. I mean, it does give you more order, but you need quite a bit of citizens to actually get enough order to make it worthwhile. So early on, food is your main focus. So if food is your main focus, what do you need? You need farms, right? Here it says build a farm, you get +5 food per year. And there are also these nets that also give you more food. And some of them give you growth. And growth will speed up your rate at which you're building your settler. Because you remember, settler uses growth. We have 10 growth. Settler needs 80 growth, so it takes 8 turns. If we can speed it up to get settlers faster, then that's great. But generally, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, early on, you do need enough food in order, because there's that 100 initial food cost, in addition to the consumption. But the consumption should be gone because the intention is that once they're built, you're sending them to build cities, right? You don't want to wait a while because they're consuming food and you're getting nothing back. So getting food is very important. So various things like food boost. If we look at, wrong one. And we look at this and we look at the food boost, you get +200 food. That's basically the, not including the consumption cost, that's basically 2 settlers. So that is nothing to scoff at for sure. And therefore, you need to find ways to get growth. But luckily, things like farm are available from the very start. So that's not your priority. But if you remember earlier, I talked about the tech polis, where you have a bonus card that's called free settler. Now this might be a tech you want to prioritize because you want to get the free settler because it doesn't use up your food or growth in your capital, because odds are that's where you're building your first couple of settlers. I mean, you can build it in your other cities, but depending on the situation, you might have to build in your capital. So polis is definitely one of those higher priorities because a free settler is a lot, right? It allows your cities to produce what they need. It doesn't use up the 100 food. And it's not even that expensive when you look at the cost. Like, it's only 80 beakers, which is the cost of all of these first level techs. So it's not even that bad. And if you get plenty of beakers, it wouldn't take long. And let's face it, expanding early on is pretty important because those cities are going to help you get ahead of your opponents. Now, that is the simple part, right? Because farms are already available from the very start. I mean, maybe you want to get something like if I can't remember the name of, actually let's just find it here. Maybe you want granary, which requires administration. So granary is interesting. Granary, actually, on second thought, maybe you don't want to prioritize it first because it requires wood and you don't have any sources of wood initially. But maybe this is something you want to eventually look at if you need food because it increases the food production of your adjacent farms. So that's definitely something to look out for. But yeah, ignore that, cross it out. Granary not that high up. So, as I was saying, military units are more interesting because you have not military drills, sorry. So, you have certain techs that unlock new units. Your initial military unit is your slinger, and if I remember correctly, yeah, you need ironworking for warrior. Wait, you could build it? Huh. Yeah, okay, yeah. So, not all nations start with ironworking. And warrior is one of your basic units. You don't have ironworking, you don't have a melee unit. But and then you have trapping, right? Not all nations start with trapping. So, if you don't have slingers and you don't have warriors, then your main military unit is a militia, which is not that great. So, in the case of Persia, which I'm using for this tutorial, you start with both of those. So at least you don't have to worry about that. But afterwards, what are you going to go for, right? Do you want to get axemen? They have bonus against polearm. Do you want to go for archers, which have 3 range, so they can shoot from afar? Right, there are lots of things that you need to consider over time because if your military units are weaker than your opponents, then they are going to have an edge. And you don't want to fight at a disadvantage, I assure you. It's already hard enough, right? For example, you might have archers and your enemies have horse archers who are just faster moving and harder hitting. Suddenly, right, it doesn't look that good on paper. So there are various techs that you need to pay attention to, like steel. Do you want axemen? And of course you also have bonus cards, right? You get the portcullis, which unlocks a free axeman. And then there are various bonus cards. That might be something else you want to think about, right? Maybe you don't want to build your initial couple of units, or at least you want some stronger ones. So maybe you want to get composite bow, so you unlock this bonus card, which will give you your pelting cavalry, and that can be a very powerful thing. Free onagers, right? Free horse archer, free camel archers, free archers. There are definitely ways, right? Phalanx give you a spearman, and then free Barim if you are coastal. You can get free horsemen, free ballista, right? There are also bonus cards that you need to take into account. So I don't want to complicate it too much, but early game, you definitely want to focus on expansion, getting enough food to get your settlers. And Paulus is a good candidate because free settlers is just very powerful in itself. And then you also want a stronger military. You might have to research ironworking and or trapping to get the basic units. But afterwards, you will start to need to think about units like spearmen, like axemen, like horsemen, right? Chariots, archers. There are quite a few units that you do need to consider if you don't want to fall behind, because when you're fighting from behind, you aren't going to go well, right? Archers are going to outrange your slingers, and if your opponent have a bunch of archers, you have a bunch of slingers. Odds are maybe if you get the ambush on them, you might win, but why take the chance? And of course, just before I end this off, certain units, all units require certain resources, right? So if you're going for axemen, you want to get enough iron so that you don't run a deficit. If you want to get archers, you want to get wood. And the earliest way you could get wood is through forestry, where you build lumber mills. So that might be one of your highest priority, because without wood, defending will be tough, because archers are one of your better defensive units early on, and if you lack wood, you are going to have a rough time. So that should be it for the very basics. I'm not here trying to explain every single tech. Maybe one day I will. But for now, just remember, early on you want to expand, but you also want to have a military. Everything else we will cover over time through the various tutorials. So anyways, this is the end of this video. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Bye.